Today, let's look at how we could create a function to build email addresses. So I've got some names, first and last. I'm going to use the join function, and the delimiter I'm going to use is the @ symbol. And then we're going to take the first name, and we're going to take a dot, in this case. You could do it different ways, and the last name. And then we're going to go ahead and add our domain, and all of that's done in quotes. And you can see when we do that, we end up with a function that creates that, and then I want to do that lowercase. And then we want to get rid of that autofill, and we can see here that we didn't have the @lgsd.us. We had to change that ampersand to a comma to use the delimiter. So now we have the lower and join. Now we want to use a map so that we could get this to go ahead and be an array formula. So we're going to map, and we're going to do A to A, and our lambda is going to be our first name and our last name. And then we can go ahead and use our join function that we had already written as the lambda. And we'll go ahead and get that pasted in there. So now we have a map function, and with our first and last, and then you have to be careful, notice here, when you try to type something like first or last or an F or an L, it's going to try to pop up a function, and as you can see, that happened there. So you have to be careful of that and make sure that maybe choose a different name. We could have called that first and last instead of F and L, because then those functions wouldn't have tried to overwrite. And now what we want to do is build this out so that it won't have those @lgsd.us. So we're going to type an if statement. If the length of A to A, if in other words, if there's something in A to A, we're going to go ahead and map. Otherwise, we are not going to do anything. And if we finish that out, that should give us, we must have put our comma in the wrong place. There we go. That should give us that piece of information. So as we look at this, we can see how we also needed to add an array formula around our if and len statement. And you can see here, if we didn't have the array formula, you get the @lgsd.us. And if we didn't have, if you just left a plain map statement, you would get that. But if we add the if len statement and the array formula, we get what we want, which is a list of email addresses based on a first and last name. So to see this finished out, we first did our formula here, lower and join. So we are joining with an ampersand, A2 and a dot and B2, and then the comma indicates we're going to use our delimiter, so @lgsd.us, and that just builds us our first email address. And that's the formula we're going to want to use later in our map function. So here's our map function. Map A to A, B to B, and our lambda is FL, lower, join, and then we replace the A to A and the L to or B to B with F and L. Now I had pointed out earlier that we could just as easily have called this first, and we could have called this last. And then when we use this, we would do first. And then this way we wouldn't have those functions trying to write. And if we do that, that shouldn't change anything. You see that still works. So we could go ahead and do that in our lambda. You just have to define those two objects as something. And then the problem with this one is we have lgsd.us going down the entire column. And to get that cleared up, we're going to do an if, len, and array formula, and we're going to wrap this whole map function with an if len and turn it into an array formula. And then we don't get anything in these parts of this column here. And then to show you just further, one last thing, we could put this all in one single formula at the top of the column, and we do that by doing an array literal giving us the title of our header, and then the rest of the function that we built here is just pasted into that array literal. So that way we could go ahead and do a set of email addresses built using first and last name, and using a dot. We could use first initial by doing, using the left function and so forth and so on, however you'd want to build that out. And then finally, I wanted to point out, if we had left this formula as an array formula, when we tried to add an array formula, that's going to just build one big long, if we were to open this up wide, you'll see that that's going to, the join is not going to work as an array formula. It's going to pull all that together. So let's undo and undo. And you can see when I went ahead and turned this into an array formula, it didn't work the way we wanted to. As you can see here, we were not able to get that well. You would have to change that to :A and :B. And when you do that, you can see it's not what we wanted. It's not breaking that down into our separate pieces. So let's undo and undo and undo. And just wanted to point out the reason we're using the map function. It's a great new function that lets us take a function like join that wasn't an array formula, and now it can be an array formula.